The number one resolution for people last year was to save more money, but nearly half gave up by February. Don't let that be you. Download Rocket Money to reach your financial goals this year. Track your spending, cut waste, and automate savings in one simple app. Rocket Money shows you all your expenses and categorizes them so you know exactly where your money's going and where you're overspending. From there, the app cuts waste by canceling your unused subscriptions and lowering your bills. No customer service needed. With that money freed up, the app will automatically set some cash aside for your goals, whether it's an emergency fund, paying off debt, or saving for vacation. Rocket Money's got you covered. Users love the app with over 186,000 five-star ratings. And on average, users can save up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Make saving money a priority this year. Go to rocketmoney.com/cancel to get started. That's rocketmoney.com/cancel. rocketmoney.com/cancel.
Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the whiskey chaser to Thursday's flagon of thick, treacly political stout. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Kenny. Talking of thick, treacly political stout, it's Alex's birthday this weekend, isn't it?
It is, and listeners, that means you only have one call to action, and that is to go and find Alex on Blue Sky or email quietriotpod@gmail.com and wish him a very happy birthday.
Oh, bless him. Was he doing something fancy involving food by any chance?
I think he may have had breakfast in bed brought to him on a very nice day of being pampered by his partner. And yeah, I think he's had a lovely time.
Jealous? Me? Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Kenny, I think at the top of the show, we need to tell listeners all the stuff we're not going to be covering, because it's quite a news-heavy weekend, and we're recording it before the full details of stuff has emerged. I'm thinking things like the Labour candidate for the Gorton and Denton by-election will get announced before we finished recording.
Yeah, probably. I'll keep a watch on socials.
Yeah, the Greens have selected their candidates, so that's exciting for them. They've gone for Hannah Spencer. She is a plumber who's also training to be a plasterer, and she's the Green leader on Trafford Council. She represents the Hale ward. And I think she was also their candidate for the Manchester mayoralty. So quite an experienced campaigner locally.
Yeah, and she's got some recognition factor up there as well, because she's been on the political... She's been out and about, hasn't she? She's definitely not one of these people that's parachuted in and everybody going, what? Who the hell's this?
Exactly, a good local pick. And then we did mention that George Galloway wasn't running and that his party had selected a local councillor as well. But actually that seems to have now been backtracked from, and there is some speculation that he still may throw that infamous hat back into the ring. What else are we not going to cover today?
We're not going to touch the latest tranche of Epstein files. Why would we? It doesn't really add very much.
Well, it would take me about 3 weeks to go through every bloody image, and
the volume of stuff is just obscene, isn't it? On so many levels. And yet again, if you were a conspiracy theorist, you would kind of look at what's come out and how it's come out and go, they've thrown Andrew under the bus, where, let's face it, he deserves to be. But he's definitely, certainly in this part of the world, the face of the files again. But Mandy returns. There's always another Mandelson story as well. Listen to that. He just cannot keep himself away from these blooming headlines. I love the idea you can phone up, you can get your partner to phone up a rich person and go, I fancy doing a course. Have you got 10 grand so that I could... Yeah, I'll wire you the money tomorrow. Nothing to see here.
And we're not going to cover Iran. There was some speculation that the US might have struck Iran by the time we recorded the show. That hasn't yet happened.
No.
Starmer is still in Beijing. We're not going to cover any more than has already been announced, that the sanctions are being lifted on certain UK parliamentarians, that we've got a deal on whiskey that is neither here nor there and not particularly different to the one we've already got with India. And then I think there's going to be 30-day visas for anyone wanting to go to China.
There are warm sounds coming out of Beijing, but that's really all we need to know at the moment until such times as more details start to emerge.
And Israel has done more strikes on Palestine overnight. We're not going to be covering that either. So, Kenny, what are we going to put our heads to? I was thinking we should follow up from our chat on the main show last week about Prosper UK, the new One Nation Tory outfit, because Kemi Badenoch has now responded and basically said centrist thinking is not welcome here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty more to talk about on that front. And that's not going away as a topic. I thought we could also have a natter about the impending King's speech. We've got a few weeks before it arrives, but we're going to be thinking about it between now and then. And perhaps riffing on what we would love to be in it, but almost certainly won't be.
Yeah. Yeah, like instead of doing fantasy cabinet, let's do fantasy King's speech. I love that. If we've got time, let's also have a quick gander at how French diplomats are weaponizing memes against MAGA. You've uncovered something quite fun. I think we should have a little look at too.
Mon Dieu and zut alors. Let's get stuck in tout de suite.
Quiet, Riot. What is Kemi Badenoch's strategy for the Tory party? With a string of high-profile defections to Reform UK, combined with the launch of Prosper UK by a string of high-profile One Nation Conservatives, it's currently unclear which ideological space even remains for the main opposition party to occupy. As we finished recording our main show on Thursday, The Guardian ran comments from Badenoch where she made it explicitly clear that, quote, centrist ideas are no longer wanted in the Conservative Party. Kenny, how frosty is the relationship between Badenoch and these, mostly former Tories that got booted out under Johnson?
Yeah, they are. They're all victims of the Johnson putsch. Her message to both Reform defectors and Prosper UK was basically naff off, albeit couched in slightly different terms. Not that different, it has to be said. It was a spiky speech she gave in Westminster. The generics and Bravermans were characterised as indulging in tantrums dressed up as politics, which was a perfectly good defence. But Prospect UK, well, they got a slightly less disparaging message, which was basically just don't get in my way. Badenoch was asked about Prospect UK explicitly by a journalist from the Mail. Let's listen to that question and answer.
You mentioned in your speech that people who don't agree with the new direction of the party need to get out of the way. How damaging could the Prosper campaign group be to the direction of this new Tory party?
Anyone who wants to help Conservatives get into number 10, help deliver a Conservative government, I will welcome. But they need to recognise the agenda which I am setting. I'm the leader of the Conservative Party, not anyone else, and it is what I think needs to happen that they need to support, because that is what Conservative Party members have voted for. Anybody who is trying to push an agenda that is not not the platform I stood on is not being helpful. It doesn't matter what group they are or what party they're in. If they are trying to get us to do things which I'm walking away from, they are not being helpful. Prosper UK, I believe, has said that it wants to see more on business policy and economic policy. That is something that Mel Stride and Andrew Griffiths are absolutely doing. If they've got new ideas which are on the right, not left-wing ideas, we will welcome them. But right now, we need to move away from any sort of factionalism or groupings. As I've said, it's not really about left or right today, it's about right or wrong. And we need to start doing the right thing, focusing on how we can help the public, not how we can help ourselves.
Well, Kenny, you probably move in more conservative circles than I do. What was their reaction to Badenoch's comments, both the One Nation types and maybe the more party faithful?
Yeah, well, Badenoch supporters quite rightly opined that there's nothing to be gained from a public negotiation on policy with the likes of Prosper UK. Whether having to repeat the I'm the leader demonstrates strength, weakness, or simply poor speech writing is up for debate, because that's what she was doing. But genuinely strong and talented leaders tend not to have to remind us that they're strong. We'll not invite Trump into that particular conversation, though. But those Conservatives with a more moderate mindset were understandably upset, by that particular outburst by Badenoch. The party's got a long and successful history as a pretty broad church.
Well, the most successful political party in human history,
Completely.
many would say.
And it's always existed, vaguely at the centre of British politics. Now, if a leader turns her back on both wings of the party, and by the wings, I mean the wings either side of her chosen position, among a lot of grassroots supporters, there's a genuine fear that she's going to have precious little left to work with, and certainly won't be setting herself up for electoral triumph.
Well, like if you stand in the middle of the road, you risk getting hit by traffic coming in both directions,
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely, exactly that. Or if you stand in the middle of the wrong road, no traffic anywhere to be seen. So pick your meme.
So Prosper UK, they don't want to be a political party. They're avowedly saying that that's not what they are. So are they aiming to be a bit like Momentum were to the Labour Party, like a movement that can reach critical mass such that they end up having a kind of gravitational pull on the actual party towards its agenda? Is that a kind of fair characterization of what they're trying to do?
I think that's the least that their ambitions will be seeking out. Whether or not they become an actual political party or something more akin to a political party remains to be seen. Partly, I think that depends on how things pan out after the May elections, and partly it depends on how Badenoch herself rides the result of those elections as well. But it's a heavyweight group of people that are behind this organisation.
Talk me through who some of them are.
There are a lot of, as you hinted at the top of the show, a lot of refugees from that Boris Johnson massacre era.
Well, famously referred to under Theresa May as the Gawkwood Squad. David Gawk, heading up that kind of more internationalist, pro-European element of centre-right conservatism. Yeah,
and Gawk was viewed as one of the big brains in the Conservative Party back when the Conservative Party still resembled something approaching the Conservative Party that we all grew up with.
As was David Lidington, very much one of the last great thinkers within that era of Conservative politics, and of course deputy to Theresa May. You've got obviously
Ruth Davidson, the most successful Conservative leader that Scotland has ever seen.
And then Amber Rudd.
Andy Street, also heading up. Ruth and Andy Street are the ones who were put in front of the cameras. These are all very pro-European Conservatives, and you would now describe them as being wet, compared with what we've got in Westminster itself. So there is a very definite pattern. They're business-minded Conservatives, and I think that's very, very important. They're pro-European Conservatives, that's definitely important. And they are widely respected. Whatever your politics, if you look at the mix of big names in the Conservative Party over the last 10, 15 years, these people are going to come out with the best reputations.
And presumably they are, none of them is an MP, and they've been very careful not to name any current Conservative MPs as being involved with Prosper UK, though I imagine they are in active discussion with a lot of them, and some of them may well be quite supportive behind the scenes. But these are still pretty powerful people. I imagine that they will have no problem raising money. These are people well connected with big business, the city, many of them holding pretty good corporate day jobs, doing much of that. But they also strike me as the very set of Conservatives that, were they MPs again, would stand on a platform of saying, we will not go into government with Reform UK. We will not prop up a Farage-led government or have him prop us up in the event of a hung parliament in that direction. Whereas people like James Cleverly, who you might argue are on the wetter side of the current parliamentary party of Conservatives, probably would be prepared to prop up Nigel Farage because they want power and they think it's better to have some of it than none of it and languish in opposition. Do you think that that could be an ambition for Prosper UK to say, look, we are now big? Their polling said there are 11 million homeless voters across the country
very
who
much
want a kind of centre-right pro-European version of conservatism back on the agenda. Do you think that their aim will be to say, well, we will endorse candidates so long as they pledge that they would not prop up Farage?
I think that's a very, very useful potential battleground for them. One of my big takeaways from week one was that they haven't picked a proper battleground. Now, there's more to be said in that in a second, but in this day and age in particular, if you don't choose your battleground when you get the choice, you're going to fight in somebody else's territory. And that's something that Farage in particular has been so very, very good at.
He'd relish it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's meat and veg to him. Now, in their literature on their website and stuff, it's, they've got very, very sensible observations about their stance on the business and the economy in particular. And the business world is crying out for this sort of approach from the Conservative Party and from Conservative MPs. But there's been very little on that. So it's clear, and particularly with somebody like Andy Street, who ran John Lewis before he was a Metro Mayor, there's an obvious battleground there. Now, the terms and conditions are, of course, that while the business world is screaming for political parties of all colours, really, to take the travails of businesses in Britain right now seriously, in the age of culture wars, is that going to be enough to get cut through?
Yeah, I mean, you're a comms person. Who do you think would have won the battle this week between Badenoch and Prosper UK? And I guess I'm talking really, within SW1 and maybe city circles, because I don't think the Prosper UK story has cut through to the wider public yet.
No, it hasn't cut through to the wider public, and I wouldn't have expected it at this stage, really. If there is a sort of a populist response to what we've been seeing this week from Conservatives and from Prosper UK, Badenoch wins the comms contest this week. Just no contest. Well, I disagree with her my way or the highway approach. She did at least hit really hard. She was interesting, if slightly annoying. She made people pay attention, whether they were on side or not. Prosper, meanwhile, offered the safe vanilla stuff that is designed not to create tensions. It's at the other end of the scale altogether, which is fine if you're already in power, but it's really not good enough if you're hoping to break into the headlines on a regular basis, influence those in power. And they really need to start stimulating debate, or they're going to become more background noise. Having said that, though, and here's the terms and conditions, the sort of people that Prosper initially are looking to influence are those businesses. And I'm starting to see a little bit of coverage in certain parts of the media already that suggests that people are sitting up and paying attention. There's actually a very good piece in the FT this weekend by Camilla Cavendish, I think, wrote it. And she says that the very existence of Prosper UK speaks volumes in itself. The question has to be asked, why would Ruth Davidson, as I've said, the most successful Scottish Tory leader the Tories ever had, and Andy Street or Ryan Jan Lewis, why would they need to set up a movement to persuade their own leadership to have a more substantial economic strategy? You think they just email them or get on a phone, just do it the old-fashioned way. Badenoch, we know, is not a good listener. She's nervous, uneasy about advice, and it's quite legitimate for her to think that Prosper is actually a vehicle for a leadership challenge of some sort at some point in the future. Whether that challenge comes from within Prosper or whether they take their political muscle and probably the financial muscle as well and start to work behind the scenes, there's a legitimate case to be made that Kemi Badenoch should be a little bit concerned about that. And she certainly doesn't want any accusations that she's gone soft. I should say that this is only week one of Prospect UK, and we're already talking about them. And I've got absolutely no doubt, because of the people that are involved and because I know how long they've been planning this as well, that there is certainly a long-term plan being played out here. This isn't about arrive, make a noise in week one and then disappear. But, their launch was an absolutely critical opportunity to lob some grenades. And I think there was precious little of that. And you simply cannot have crap comms in 2026. Yeah. We learned this the hard way in the Brexit debate.
Are you pitching for work, Kenny?
Well, you know what? I think I'm probably not the sort of person they want. It's a fair point, though. If they can't convince me that their comms are right, and I'm somebody who would align with an awful lot of what it is they're saying, I accept the need for a much more professional and relevant approach to the way businesses are treated in this country. Particularly small and medium-sized businesses have suffered under various governments for the last 10 years, and work needs to be done. But, if they can't convince me that their comms are good, then they've got an issue. We learned during the Brexit debate that if your message doesn't have absolute clarity and emotional resonance, that's the thing. If you don't have that emotional resonance, the other side will absolutely wipe the floor with you, regardless of whether their actual arguments have any substance or not. So I suspect from a comms perspective, and it was a comms question you asked, that's the biggest challenge that they are going to face. They're professional politicians. They know what they're doing. They talk a really good game, but can they get that emotional resonance? Let's wait and see.
Quiet Riot.
New CBS Sunday.
The Grammys, baby!
History will be made.
Pay the toll.
Live, unfiltered, unexpected. Woo! Bigger than ever.
I was a ghost.
Bigger stars, bigger performances. Music's biggest night is getting bigger.
Now you see what all the hype is about.
Trevor Noah hosts the Grammy Awards live.
Anything is possible.
CBS Sunday and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Quiet Riot.
Here it comes.
Open the door. Black robes!
Budgets and spring statements usually dominate the political calendar of Westminster, but today we wanted to horizon scan towards the end of this Parliament. The King's speech has been penciled in for the week after the May elections, though the exact date remains a closely guarded secret. Well, it does for now anyway. It's usually the centrepiece of the state opening of Parliament in the UK, marking the start of a new parliamentary session. It's written by the government, but delivered by the King in the House of Lords, and it outlines the legislative agenda and policy priorities for the coming year. And it's worth remembering that votes on the King's speech are generally considered votes of confidence in the government. Starmer suspended several Labour MPs for voting for a Scottish National Party amendment on the two-child benefit limit after the last King's speech. So this stuff is real politics. Many hotly anticipate a night of the long knives for Starmer after what's expected to be an absolute drubbing for Labour on May the 7th. The timing of the King's speech could make it politically harder for the likes of Streeting, Miliband, Rayner, and insert your own choice here, to challenge the PM and say, we need to go in a different direction when the King is about to come to Parliament to announce what the government plans to do for the next year. All of which begs the question of, what exactly is the government going to tell us it wants to do in the next Parliament? What's going to make the cut and what won't make the cut? And what do we wish was going to be in it? Okay, Naomi, this is very much your wicket. So kick us off. Which bills are we expecting to get laid this year?
Well, before I answer that, Kenny, let's go back and take stock of what the previous King's speech promised to deliver, and we can kind of track a bit of government progress on that. This has been quite a long parliamentary session by normal standards. We had a King's speech kind of pretty soon after the 2024 general election, and it'll be midway through 2026 by the time we get the next one. So of the 40 bills included in that previous legislative programme, just over half have become law, 21.
Right.
And they include the government's flagship Employment Rights Act, the Planning and Infrastructure Act, the Renters' Rights Act, and the Passenger Railway Services, the Public Ownership Act. But the government has also passed legislation on modernising mental health provision. They created an independent football regulator. They've ensured public buildings are better protected against terrorist incidents. And of the other bills that haven't yet become an act, there are about 15 currently making their way through different ping-pongy parliamentary stages between the Lords and the Commons. That includes things like the legislation to build a rail line between Crewe and Manchester. Obviously, we hear a lot of talk about levelling up still and infrastructure in the north and all sorts of concerns about things being delayed, like the tram in Leeds and West Yorkshire and things like that. A smoking ban for people born after January 2009 is still making its way through. The formal creation of Great British Railways and the creation of a new National Holocaust Memorial and Learning Centre next door to Parliament. So those are all sort of still making their way through. Government are going to have to try and rush all of those to be finalised before the sword comes down and this parliamentary session ends. So you're going to have to see some stuff rolling over into the next parliament too. Let's not forget the crime and policing bill is all still clogged up in the machinations of legislative procedure, making its way through the Lords at the moment. And then the remaining ones, so you've got 21 passed, 15 still going through. The rest of them are yet to even be introduced to Parliament. And that includes government's reforms of the leasehold system, a ban on gay conversion practices. So it's going to be really interesting to see which of those they choose to roll over into the new term and those that get quietly dropped. So let me then go to what I think is actually likely to happen and come forward. A lot of speculation that government are going to bring forward the more politically difficult topics this time round. So bills around migration rules, support for children with special educational needs and disability, the SEND stuff. I'm hoping we might get to talk to Sam Friedman, education policy expert, about some of that on the main show. And remember last year, everyone was talking about mandatory digital ID and they thought that that would be included. Appetite for that seems to have dampened a bit. Maybe it won't be mandatory, but more of a nudge theory thing of, well, if you want everything to be seamless, you need the ID, so sign up for it. Let's see if that comes forward. I think there's going to be bills tackling foreign interference in our elections through the elections bill. That is also hotly anticipated to include that manifesto pledge of lowering the voting age to 16. Yeah. Hope for a mandatory retirement age for the Lords. I mean, literally the least, in my opinion, they can do in terms of Lords reform. They're going to say, once you hit 80, you're probably going to have to, hand in your parliamentary pass and stop going in to legislate. And there might well be something on AI and copyright too. Back to big government commitments. Remember, they are desperate to meet their house building targets. I think they're going to probably bring forward another bill on planning reform and nature to change the rules around protected species so that you can speed up these huge infrastructure projects to be delivered. But some people are saying, actually, that could be done via secondary legislation, statutory instrument, etc. Doesn't necessarily have to be a full bill becoming an act of law. I am nearly there, Kenny. I think
it's a busy parliament, isn't it?
The existing bills on railway reform and the prosecution framework for the Troubles in Northern Ireland that we've talked about on the show, that might slip beyond May too. And then there's the Lammy agenda, the legislation on scrapping jury trials to try and clear the court backlog. That's causing a lot of controversy. Could that appear before May and be carried into the next session too? Don't know. Let's keep a close eye on all of that. But I wanted to ask you, Kenny, if you had 3 wishes of bills that Prime Minister Kenny Campbell could ask King Charlie to lay before Parliament, what would you pick and why?
Shall we ping pong them?
Go on.
So 3 wishes. So before my 3 wishes, even before we get to the 3 wishes, I'd just like a pledge. I'd love a pledge. And we've heard how much work is being done already in Westminster. I'd like a do fewer things better pledge, because these are really very tough times. and there are some very, very big issues to be dealt with by countries everywhere. And I'd applaud loudly some attempt to acknowledge that in our lifetimes, there's never been a greater need for the government to focus hard on a small number of extremely high priorities. I would really quite happily pass up the opportunity for another 40 promises, or this is Labour we're talking about, another 10 flipping pledges written on a piece of paper or a piece of stone. Just hammer away at 2 or 3 utterly crucial policy areas and devote whatever resources are needed to get them landed. So, with that said, these are wishes, all right? So I'm ignoring all that good stuff that you've run through already. That was a solid list of what's happening. So the first of my core policies would probably be, how would I call this? I'd call it a national resilience and security reset.
Okay.
So we're not looking at chess beating. We're not looking at culture wars. We're looking at grown-up statecraft. We desperately, desperately, desperately need a serious joined up plan on defense, energy, and energy security, on supply chains, on cyber defense, on global policy. It has to be joined up, and it has to admit that the world is so much messier than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
If we're in a world of transactional diplomacy, that's fine, but we have to at least act like Britain's got the memo that the world has changed. So my first core policy would be a national resilience and security reset, a holistic approach to these huge global challenges that are impacting.
So covering energy, climate, defense, intelligence, the whole thing.
Yeah, all the areas where we've got severe weaknesses in this country and we're at severe risk of impact from foreign players. So that's my first one. Small, eh? It's just the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
What's your first one?
It will be a surprise to precisely no one. An act that would crystallize beneficial regulatory alignment with the EU, because I think that is the precursor to anything in and around the associate membership idea, this multi-layered EU membership conversation that is beginning to happen more frequently in Brussels and occasionally within the Westminster Commentariat too, but that nobody's put any detail on. But I think in order to even be vaguely considered for that by Brussels, as and when they decide if they will even tolerate that level of associate membership, we would need to have not diverged much from the rules and regulations that the single market expects of the countries that participate within it. And the risk with Brexit is that you end up with passive divergence. So the EU are constantly updating their rules and regulations for organizations operating within the single market. And if we don't pass similar legislation here in the UK, we end up diverging passively.
Yes.
And that is often even more dangerous than active divergence, where we're saying, no, actually, it's in our interest to have a completely different agenda and rules and regulations determining a product or, food or whatever. So I would love us to make a big commitment. And look, Starmer at the beginning of the year did that BBC interview with Laura Kuenssberg, where he basically said our ambition is to have regulatory alignment for goods and services with the EU. So put your money where your mouth is and pass some legislation with your 200 seat majority to make that commitment. That gives business the certainty it needs. Okay, this is a regulatory framework within which we are needing to operate. That should boost investment. It should quash any qualms around boardroom tables the world over about whether rules are going to get changed from underneath their feet. They'll be able to make those investment decisions, long-term planning, and really begin to integrate better with our nearest trading partners, reduce all of that friction, and very critically, that will get you economic growth. We know that if you align on goods, you can claw back about a third of the GDP we've lost from Brexit. If you align on goods and services, you could be clawing back about half of that GDP. And that allows you to fund all the other things that you'd like to do and tackle living standards crisis here in the UK. So that would be my primary one. Almost certainly no surprise to anybody who is a regular listener of me and this show. Kenny, what would your second one be? Because we're getting 3 each here.
I was just listening to you going through your first one. Have you been talking to Prosper UK by any chance?
Nah.
You might be drifting towards Conservative membership the way things are going.
Not at all.
So your first dream bill is basically the same as my second one. Because my first bill was a bit wordy, my second dream bill is, I've called it the bunting bill.
Go ahead.
I would like to hear just once a King's speech that admits the bleeding obvious, which is that Britain doesn't need more bunting, it needs fewer barriers. So this demands a proper root and branch review of what's actually throttling growth. Not the symptoms. We'll come to that at some point down the line. So the boarded up shops and the to-let signs we know about, but these are symptoms. These are not the problems. So we want to look at the causes. We want to look at the trade friction. We want to look at the skills shortages, the planning gridlock, the investor nerves, and a relationship with our nearest market that still resembles a bit of an awkward family WhatsApp group, really. While some people were congratulating themselves on regaining their sovereignty after Brexit, the EU quietly signed trade deals with, well, actually in the last few days with India, and everyone else got on with it. Meanwhile, our exporters have been filling in forms the size of Tolstoy novels. So, if the government wants to say Britain's back in business, then say what that means. It means a pragmatic approach to trade. It means grown-up engagement with Europe. It definitely means fewer self-inflicted obstacles. Read into that what you will. And it means an end to the idea that sticking flags on lampposts counts as some sort of half-arsed industrial strategy. It's just a ridiculous distraction from the grown-up stuff. It really is. So, the bunting bill, I'm going to move that in the house. What's top that if you can?
So you don't want street parties and jubilees and flag shagging. You want very serious, get rid of the trade friction and grow our economy again, Bill.
Look, you can have parties and you can have your bunting in the street if you want, but you cannot have the idea that somehow is sufficient to maintain a political discourse and a political debate in this country over the next year, because we're talking about the length of one parliament. It has to stop being a piece of wrapping paper that sits around the genuinely incredibly important decisions that have to be made about what we do in this country to address the problems that have arisen in the last 10 years, really. Stop using bunting as a piece of camouflage.
Quiet, Riot.
I didn't even realize I was wasting $415 a month until I downloaded Rocket Money. I thought I had my finances under control until the app laid out all my spending and categorized it for me. Takeout, shopping, and unused subscriptions were quietly draining my account. And as a result, my savings took a back seat. But Rocket Money doesn't just tell you what you're wasting money on. It takes action to save you money. First, the app looks at your income and monthly expenses and calculates how much you can safely spend each day to stay under budget. Rocket Money also finds and cancels unwanted subscriptions for you and even negotiates better rates on your bills so you have more money in your pocket. On average, Rocket Money members can save up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Users love the app with over 186,000 five-star ratings. It's time to simplify your finances and take control of your money. Go to rocketmoney.com/cancel to get started. That's rocketmoney.com/cancel. rocketmoney.com/cancel.
Quiet, Riot.
Well, my second one is going to be, yes, again, no surprise. They have brought forward an elections bill. They are going to bring forward an elections bill. And that'll contain the votes at 16 and the retire the laws at 80 and blah, blah, blah. Maybe something good on foreign interference, let's hope. But I wanted it to contain another manifesto commitment to reform the voting system. Now, that wasn't in the manifesto worded as such, but it was there as an acknowledgement that the current system is broken and is not working. We are in a situation now where every single party is a minority view in the country.
Mm-hmm.
When you go back to the 2017 general election, the main party of the left and right commanded the support of more than 80% of the British public. Fast forward to now, the main party of the left and right command 2/5, 2 in 5 voters supporting them. We have had the most accelerated fracturing of voting intention across our electorate than has existed in my lifetime. And the system we have is not fit for purpose to cope with that. Now, people will look at the SDP alliance back in the 80s, riding very, very high in the polls ahead of an election. They then, completely burn, don't get anywhere at all. But the Reform lead has been much longer than that of the SDP alliance poll lead. So actually, gone are the days when first past the post froze out minority parties from getting 100% of executive power. And I think Labour have just got to wake up to this fact. They have got to wake up to the fact that they are going to be letting themselves down, and much more importantly, the majority of the country, by not tackling the change to the voting system that is so needed when we are now operating in a multi-party country. So I'm desperate for that for so many reasons. One, because I don't think that any vote should be wasted. If you believe in equality, you must believe in democratic equality, and votes should no longer not be counted or completely wasted. We shouldn't have to vote tactically. We should be able to say, here's who I'd like, here's who I'd like. If I can't get that choice, and if I've got to live with it, here's my third preference, etc., because that is the fairest and most proportionate way to have our country governed. It would also speak to this economic growth issue that we've both now flagged repeatedly during the course of this show and in this particular section about wanting that for the country. Because when we look at countries that have got proportionate systems, they have more stable economic long-term prospects. You do, of course, get market volatility in the week or month that a coalition agreement is being hammered out. But over the course of those parliaments, you tend to have much more financial stability across the market. So therefore, you can have more planning and investment made, more direct investment from foreign countries into those systems. And it really does benefit everybody. So politically, it's the right thing to do. Democratically, it's the right thing to do. And economically, it is the right thing to do. But then when we look at other reasons for it, well, of course, you shouldn't grant 100% executive power to one individual, one party, which is what First Past the Post does. It allows an extremist, far right or far left government to have 100% control and not be tempered by more moderate partners with whom it has to cut deals to get legislation through. The fifth one relates back to my first wish for the King's Speech around that relationship with the EU. Well, our trading partners are not going to want to offer us much, or certainly not without attaching a very big price to it, if they are concerned that we could swing violently from Europhilic to Eurosceptic government every 5 years. And a proportionate voting system would give them the confidence that the UK was, once again, a more reliable ally with whom to cut a deal. So my second King's Speech wish would be for that elections bill to pledge to hold a national commission on our voting system and get broad consensus across the country that we do indeed need proportionate voting at Westminster elections.
That last point you made is absolutely crucial, because it's very easy for those of us who are quite gung-ho about getting closer relationships with Europe to forget just how many people within the EU at very senior levels as well are not particularly enamored with the idea of Britain coming back in and being a nuisance.
I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that when you leave the EU, it's like divorcing 28 scorned lovers.
Oh, gosh. I don't want that legal bill.
Without us.
Yeah.
So it's not like one divorce. It's like going through 27 simultaneous divorces and then having to try and reach some kind of, post-divorce settlement. Not easy. And then are we going to have to get down on one knee to 27 people? Yes,
We're
we
going to
are.
have to get down on both knees, I think. We're going to. Bleh. All right, let's move on from that.
Yeah, go on, Kenny. You've got one more.
So I'm going to keep the last one short and sweet. I thought I'd have some fun with the last one of my bills because these are all dream bills. My third dream bill is the sin bin bill. Politicians, if you announce something on social media before it exists in legislation, you lose your damn phone for a month. No questions asked, you're gone. And if you resign in a blaze of moral outrage and then reappear on a rival party's platform within 90 days, you've got to wear a sash that reads transfer window signing for every one of your blooming media appearances. That's it, the sin bin bill. I will get into power on the basis of that bill alone. What's your third one?
Okay, my third one is land value taxation.
The
UK has a really strong and overlooked case for LVT because land is finite. You can't move it to Dubai. It is immobile and largely increases in value due to community investment rather than individual effort. So when transport links improve, when planning permission is granted, or cities expand and grow, landowners benefit from rising land values without having created that value themselves. And an LVT would capture a portion of this unearned uplift and recycle it back into public service while avoiding all of those economic distortions of taxes on work, on trade, on investment. And crucially, it discourages land hoarding and speculation because it motivates, it encourages productive use of land. So it will help stabilize the housing market. It'll make it fairer, more efficient, a much more efficient alternative to existing property taxes like council tax and business rates, which all of us, find so difficult to navigate and egregious and desperately unfair and regressive. And it currently penalizes buildings and land being improved.
Yeah.
It is a very, very pure form of taxation. And I guess one thing that a King's Speech could do would be to say, well, the first step towards a land value tax would be to do a re-rating. When we look at council tax bans, they've not been done for decades. Places that have grown in value exponentially since those ratings are still in a tax band that just bears no resemblance to the value of the land that property actually sits on at the moment. So a bit of a geeky one, but that would be my final plea. For God's sake, let's begin to have a more progressive rather than regressive taxation system.
In Scotland, they're looking at council tax at the moment, and there are changes coming into the top end of the market. I think your third one, you get a congratulations for introducing a bill that starts to address issues that were raised in 1066. This is a genuinely historic piece of legislation you could be bringing forward, Naomi, and you're to be congratulated on that.
Quiet, Riot.
The number one resolution for people last year was to save more money, but nearly half gave up by February. Don't let that be you. Download Rocket Money to reach your financial goals this year. Track your spending, cut waste, and automate savings in one simple app. Rocket Money shows you all your expenses and categorizes them, so you know exactly where your money's going and where you're overspending. From there, the app cuts waste by canceling your unused subscriptions and lowering your bills. No customer service needed. With that money freed up, the app will automatically set some cash aside for your goals, whether it's an emergency fund, paying off debt, or saving for vacation. Rocket Money's got you covered. Users love the app, with over 186,000 five-star ratings. And on average, users can save up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Make saving money a priority this year. Go to rocketmoney.com/cancel to get started. That's rocketmoney.com/cancel. rocketmoney.com/cancel.
Quiet, Riot.
Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord,
Very good.
or Talleyrand to most of us, was the original diplomatic mercenary turned statesman. Brilliant. cynical, endlessly adaptable, serving revolutionaries, emperors, and monarchs alike, while always putting French interests, and often his own, ahead of pretty slogans. A byword for crafty diplomacy, his name still echoes whenever we talk about clever, opportunistic statecraft rather than high-minded idealism. Now, fast forward to modern day, and French diplomats are doing something that would have made Talleyrand raise an eyebrow, taking to social media with memes and light touch humour to counter misinformation and MAGA-aligned narratives. The French Foreign Ministry's @French Response account has been posting memes, cartoons, and cheeky replies on X to push back against disinformation that damages France's image and global messaging. So, let's ask the big question. Would Talleyrand approve of diplomats wading into meme wars, or would he see it as a sign of how much diplomacy has fallen, changed? Kenny, tell us more. Exactly what kind of memes has this account been pushing?
Well, they're not kitten pictures, that's not what we're talking about. They're pushback memes, if you want a label for them. The official French Foreign Affairs account, we need to remind ourselves that this is grown-up stuff, really. And they've been using viral-style graphics and humour to counter disinformation and unfriendly narratives.
Give us an example.
Yeah.
Give me an example.
After the White House account suggested that Greenland's future was a choice between the US, Russia, or Chinese control, the French response feed replied with a single emoji, and it was just the European Union flag. It was kind of like the middle finger being thrown to the White House. Or I'm trying to think of another one. They had a pop at Elon Musk. The Republican feed, House Judiciary GOP is the name of the feed. It's a pro-Republican feed. And it posted that it had, and I quote, subpoenaed Europe's secret 183-page censorship order to Elon Musk's X platform. To which French response replied with, get this, they replied with a scream emoji and the simple message that the EU's, quotes, secret order was finally found 23 days after it was published on the Commission's own website. So heavy on the sarcasm, but also heavy on pushing back against disinformation, really.
So you're the comms guy. Is this an era of when they go low, we go high? Or is it a little bit more sophisticated? Because from what you just described, it feels a bit like just a shitposting war.
Honestly, it's not shitposting. It is quite easy to sort of fall into that trap. And look, as older people, we tend to look at what happens in the world and go, it was better in my day, the language was better in my day, the music was better in my day, everything was better. This isn't shitposting. What they're doing is using a different language. I mean, look, it's not as if social media hasn't been used in the political world for the 20 or so years of its existence. In many ways, the battleground has long since shifted to feeds and algorithms. And if hostile narratives spread through memes, then I think it's fair to say you either respond in that language or you concede the terrain. It's not the case that the French are abandoning diplomacy. Definitely not the case. But they are adapting the way they distribute their messages. And the key difference is intent, I think. Shitposting is noise for attention, beginning, middle, and end. But memes are different. Memes, I always think, are messages in a very shareable wrapper. That's what you're doing, and that's what the French are doing.
Yeah.
And if this is anchored to policy and to purpose, then it can be quite sophisticated.
Well, is it? I mean, is it? So you're telling me it's not a troll account?
No, it's definitely not a troll account.
Is it part of a wider strategy to combat misinformation and cyber attacks? And is it just for the French to protect themselves, or are they trying to cast a safety net around allies as well?
Predominantly, it will be initially for the French to protect themselves. They've got a little team doing this, and they need to test the water, because if it's just vibes and dunks, then it becomes a foot fight. The line between sophisticated online communication and a vibe war is very, very thin. But, the initial signs are that this way of communicating is really quite effective compared with other diplomatic ways of communicating, of getting a message out to a whole bunch of people, and we're talking tens of millions, who wouldn't otherwise get your side of the argument.
And I do think humour can be a very powerful way to undermine an adversary.
The French have realised this because it's part of a broader effort by Paris, I think, to treat the information space as a new battleground in diplomacy and security, and somewhere where you don't just go trolling for laughs. And again, it's not random shit posting; it's engagement, which is quite specifically aimed at countering hostile narratives, and it is aimed at defending national interests in what is a very messy and a very sort of time-sensitive environment. The world of social media. It's fast, it's ugly, and it demands attention now. So yeah, I think it's to be applauded. It's a different language, and France takes language incredibly seriously. We know this, and I think a big round of applause for them taking the risk of engaging on this level.
Kenny, can you imagine His Majesty's government here in the UK doing anything similar? And what would they even call it? Like the English finger wag?
Can I imagine HMG doing this? Do you know, actually, I can. Can I imagine it landing well? Look, terms and conditions is my favourite phrase. Look, it wouldn't be the English finger wag. It would be something, oh my God, it would be something focus grouped into oblivion, wouldn't it? Like Brit Fact Response Hub. It would have a beige logo. It would have a little group of civil servants arguing about whether a meme counts as guidance. And there'll be a really carefully drafted joke, which has been cleared by 7 lawyers in the Cabinet Office. Sir Humphrey's heavy hand will be sitting right on top of it. And where the French deploy a silly, a sly gif, we would issue a 14-tweet thread, and it would begin with something like, "It has come to our attention," followed by a link to a flipping PDF. And you know what, though? In its own way, that would be the most British meme of all.
Quiet Riot.
And that's it for another Sunday School. We hope you enjoyed the show. We hope you enjoyed our parliamentary wishes. And if you want to help us shape the podcast going forward, please don't forget to sign up to back us at ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod. And as a bonus, you'll get an invite to our February editorial meeting.
We'll be back on Thursday with Sam Friedman returning to the show to talk with us about education policy and much, much more. As you know, huge amount of news that we've not been able to cover today that we'll get our teeth stuck into on Thursday. So until then, please all have a lovely start to your week. Safe in the knowledge we love you very, very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
And I'm Kenny. Talking of thick, tricky, treacly, and I'm Kenny.